I wanted to ask a question about preferences and dummy candidates, and we heard a statement about the importance of candidates' preference and the importance of preference deals between candidates. I suppose my view is, as a voter, they're my preferences and they're for me to allocate, and that's how the system works. My question, and maybe it's for Warwick, but perhaps for some other of the panellists as well, would we be better served if the VEC didn't perpetuate the system of candidates claiming the preferences for themselves by actively distributing how to vote cards in their booklet in postal votes? And could this practice be the explanation for why we see so many dummy candidates in postal elections and very few in attendance elections?
Is that true?
Thanks, Reece. And Reece, over at Knox, you've got single wards, haven't you, in your municipality, one of the few that's left. Warwick, did you want to address any of that or any of the other panellists?
Reece, with respect to that, the VEC doesn't design the electoral system. The VEC just applies what the Act requires. If you're not happy with that, then get the Act changed, and I'll apply.
That's true, and Warwick, we expect those sort of responses from you. And we don't know, genuinely, we don't want to compromise your vote as well, because, you know, you work for the government, so fair enough. Yeah. Now, the other chap, yes, you got a question? Sorry.
Have a go at that as well. And sorry, I'd forgotten, I think Knox just moved to attendance voting, is that right? Okay, well, my apologies, that's escaped me. But yeah, Knox, well, maybe my theory now is shot to pieces, because Knox very much is similar to Glen Ira. My view, though, is that you can't have postal voting and not have an indication of the candidate's recommended preferences being sent at the same time in the envelope. Because if you take that out, you change a fundamental part of our electoral system at the local level. It makes it different to how we vote at a state or federal level. Those indication of preferences are crucial, just like we expect when we turn up on Saturday to be harassed by 30 people handing out how to vote cards for all the different parties that are standing in whatever seat you vote for on Saturday. And I think we've got to make sure that we have that opportunity in local government. Of course, it's up to the voter to choose how they want to fill out their ballot paper, but I believe candidates standing through the postal system in the same way as candidates standing through an attendance voting system at local, state or federal level, there's got to be that opportunity to provide a recommended how to vote. If you want to vote for me and you want to follow how I suggest you should allocate your preferences, people need to have that information, in my view. So to the state review and the people who are here who are part of it, I'd say if you've got a problem with dummy candidates in the postal voting system, we'll outlaw the postal voting system and deal with it through how to vote cards on election day, because I don't believe that you can remove one without removing the other, and I think it's a really important point. I hope it comes through in your review.
Thank you, Geoff.
What's the panel's view on, I guess with the Senate election, the record ballot papers, one of the wash-ups may well be a push for optional preferential. What does the panel think about optional preferential in local government as a way of diluting the downside of dummies and backroom preference deals? And also, any views on directly elected mayors? If so, should that be a choice for the council, or should it be state imposed about directly elected mayors? And if you have a directly elected mayor, should they also be forced to run for council, or should it be the Melbourne model where you have to choose one or the other? My view is you get greater talent if you force mayoral candidates to run for council as well. Then you attract better fields overall.
Okay, we'll start with Oscar at the other end.
Probably your latter question, Stephen, in terms of the electing the mayor directly. I think certainly every year it's an issue with us where deals start to happen, I reckon, about now, and the candidates who are keen to be mayor next year start to do their work behind the scenes. And I shouldn't say this, but it's always a shit fight every year, and I must say I hate it. I'm lucky enough to get it in the first year, and look, I think the residents should really have the opportunity to choose the mayor. not the councillors. I don't think the person that's often the mayor may not be I don't think the most responsible person for that role, and it's just as long as you've got majority, you become mayor. So I think this would probably be a view that most of you out there may agree with, but you think of Geelong and Melbourne, and you think if you've got 4 years, if I had 4 years in this council to be mayor, it would give me enough time, I think, to start to deliver some of those projects. But by the time those projects get traction, you're in your third year, and the mayor, you came up with a great idea, but the mayor in the third year is basically opening the venue and/or endorsing the project. So I think you've got to get at least 2 years, I think, as mayor to start to do things, and I think people should elect the mayor. And it's in fact a question raised a lot by the residents saying, well, what do you mean you're not the mayor? You were the mayor just last year, weren't you? I say, yeah, well, we change it every year, and even trying to explain that to your own family can be a bloody issue. But I think people need to do it, and I think it's got to be I think majority vote. I think it's got to be higher than that. If you've got a council of 11, I think at least 8 should endorse the mayor, because you start to have issues where people who don't vote for you. I was lucky enough, I got unanimously elected, but we have had issues where we've got majority, but the councils that didn't elect you. You start to have a bit of friction, and certainly issues start to appear very quickly with those councils that didn't want you mayor. Some of them have to vote for you on the night because they think, hey, if I don't, there may be some consequences later. I hate it. I actually hate the mayoral election and the amount of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and let's not beat around the bush. I think most of us know what they are. Promises are made, and unfortunately sometimes you can't deliver on them, and very complex situation, Stephen, but I think it's got to be elected through the people. And I don't think that's going to happen in Melbourne for a long time, but I'll certainly be voting for it. It doesn't have to be me, I can be who it was, but give the guy 4 years or her 4 years to start delivering on the
project. So you're not too keen on the process, but the outcome's pretty good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maryantonett?
Well, I spoke this morning of, I think my preference is for direct election. I think that you only, if you don't go for direct election in a world where local government becomes more and more important, you end up disintermediating the voter. And if you do that and you can't explain why the heck the world is so complicated and doesn't seem to lead to sometimes linear results of how you elect the mayor and how you elect your leadership, more bad things come from that than good things. And if you link that to the conversation that you had earlier, which was about attendance voting or postal voting, well, we got to sort some of this stuff out before we go to e-voting, where none of those rules will then apply. And that world is coming faster than we like to think, because in some measure, although we're all reformers in this room, we're also products of the status quo. Let's just think about what that world looks like.
Thank you. Geoff, quickly.
I like the directly elected mayor model, but I think it requires a large, iconic council, and certainly both Melbourne and Geelong sort of fit that criteria. I think for it to be rolled out more widely, you'd probably need some greater scale, because I think you can't have a directly elected mayor for 4 years without that being effectively a full-time position and paid on a full-time basis. And I mean, let's face it, Queenscliff are not going to be able to afford having a full-time mayor, and neither are most of our rural shires. So I think it would have to be probably a decision of the council, and if I was the state government, I wouldn't be providing that choice more widely than Melbourne or Geelong, unless I first of all basically created a bigger scale amongst councils. And just quickly on your question around optional preferential voting, I'm not opposed to optional preferential voting, but I am opposed to creating something different at the local level than what applies in Victoria at a state and federal level. I think it's confusing in Queensland, where there is that difference between voting at state and federal level, as I understand it. And I don't think we should go down that path here in Victoria unless it's done across the board and impacts everybody equally, or all levels equally.
Thanks, Geoff. Mike?
On the optional preferential, I agree with what Geoff said, but I would like to touch on the directly elected mayor. In Queensland, all mayors are directly elected. It's not all peaches and cream, but because, say, in my case, I was elected mayor for 5 consecutive terms in a popular vote. but 4 of those councillors probably wouldn't have elected me as mayor. So there's an interesting comment on the system. So you can end up with some quite lively debates you can end up with a fairly hostile council, and I got pretty much used to those. And of course you need the Local Government Act then to be aligned with what's actually happening, because our Local Government Act said that the mayor was the spokesperson of the council and responsible to the council and had to do what the council said. And when you ended up with a conflict, I said, well, hang on, I'm not elected by you, I'm elected by the community, and thanks, my loyalty lies with them. So it did create some conflicts, but I don't think you need to shy away from conflicts in democracy. A lot of good things come out of conflict. It's where the debate happens. We were often thought of as, and in my last term, we did have quite a pretty lively democracy and some pretty hot debates, and it's probably why they amalgamated us to shut us up. On the other hand, we still brought down a balanced budget, we were still financially flush, we still won local government awards, we won environment awards, and we did very well. So we had a very lively democracy. Everyone knew what was going on in my council. It was the hot topic in the papers. People knew which council they were in, and they knew what the issues were. So I think so on the balance, and like I say, it's not that clear cut. I would go for the directly elected mayor as the way to go.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd?
Steve, thanks for your question. It's a really good question. I think it needs to be debated and discussed a bit more around both the optional preferential as well as the directly elected mayor. On the optional preferential, I'm happy to support to explore the open a bit more further. But for me, as an individual, this is just a personal view, I actually don't pay much attention to preferences when it comes to getting involved in an election. I try to work as hard as I can to get as much primary votes as I can. That's the mind frame that I have, and I think I'm happy to look at the idea of the optional preferential. I think it's important for local government to, again, coming back from my earlier point, to decide what's best for them. I'm largely opposed to the idea of directly elected mayors. Again, this is a personal view of mine. I've had the opportunity to work with 4 different mayors during my time on Monash Council, and I have to say they have been very stable, very transparent, and in terms of the process of moving from one mayor to another, we had absolutely no issues. There were 4 individuals who had tremendous leadership qualities and had their own vision for the city, but at the same time shared that overall vision with the council. In relation to directly elected mayors, though, I don't disagree with Melbourne and Geelong having their own model, given Melbourne is the capital of Victoria and Geelong being one of the largest growing regional cities in Victoria. But I do want to stress that for directly elected mayors, it does only favour a small portion of the population, because you're not running a campaign only to be elected within your ward. You're trying to run a whole campaign for the entire LGA, and unfortunately, reality says that only favours people with strong financial backing, as well as strong financial backgrounds themselves. So not everyone can participate in that process in a fair way. And I also think that, and let's be honest here, most councillors and most candidates who want to run for council would like the opportunity to serve as mayor in that term. Certainly I think that's a view shared by a lot of councillors that I've spoken to in my time on council, not just within Monash, but also outside of Monash. I think it's only fair, I think, for any councillor to put their hand up and leave their legacy behind and leave the city. So, so I'm not in favour of it.
Thank you. Warwick, we've had, the last election saw the first directly elected mayor of the city of Geelong. There's obviously a by-election there now, isn't there? Any thoughts?
Look, I won't offer a view on that. I believe that's a decision that the council should be able to take.
Yep.
On the optional preferential matter, it doesn't matter what voting system you have. There are advantages and disadvantages to all of them. I will support Councillor Lake's view that if you are able to align local, state and federal voting systems, then it does make it easier certainly for the electorate to understand the process and potentially reduce your informality. That's as much as I'll say.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure who to direct this to, but I just want to start with a statement that this is my 5th term, and I've experienced lots of different configurations of polls, but also councillors. And my experience has been, yes, there's been dummy candidates, but on the whole, I have found that good councillors are elected. And even if they're not good at the start and they've sort of, you know, stood for the wrong reasons, they soon learn that, you know, it's very worthwhile to be part of the democratic process. So I'm pretty sanguine, to be honest, about that. But my question is about ward systems. Phil described ward systems as parochial fiefdoms. Again, my experience I have found with single ward systems that does entrench parochialism, but when it's multi-member, that dilutes that parochialism to some extent, and I wonder if anybody would comment on that.
Well, thanks, Angela. I think an individual councillor, no matter whether it's a single-member ward or a multi-member ward, must separate the issues. I think for a councillor who represents one ward like myself and at the same time serving as deputy mayor for Monash, you need to think about what the issues are. I mean, if it's a drain exploding in the middle of a reserve, that's an issue for my ward. But if it's talking about your health and wellbeing policy, that's an issue for the overall council. So I think for a councillor, you need to separate those two things: what's important for the council as a whole and what's important for your ward in terms of the issues. In terms of the review of wards and boundaries conducted by the VEC, I actually believe a review on that needs to take place. I think the VEC, according to legislation, reviews the boundaries every 8 years. Yeah, 8 years. But I think, as again, to my earlier statement, the councils themselves have an important role in that regard around not only responding to what the VEC's proposed, but also actually engaging in their own consultation process on what the boundaries should be, what the names of the wards are, etc. I don't think we take that up as much. Some councils do, some councils don't. But I think local councils should be dictating that process as well, just as much as the VEC should be.
Thanks, Councillor Oscar.
Andrew, I do believe in the single-member wards, but I maybe should answer the question about the right candidates being elected. And you think about the quota and how high it's set. We had 49 candidates in Melbourne, and of course 11 got elected. But the quota was quite high in each of the wards. We've got three wards, and I think, look, people aren't stupid. The residents know who to vote for. I think dummy candidates, you're never going to remove them, as Geoff said before. It's impossible. How are you going to do that? So anyone can run, as long as they pay their $250, they're a genuine candidate as far as anyone's concerned. But I think having a high quota and primary vote, I think would suggest that yes, you are in fact probably the right person for the job. But are there people that are elected that shouldn't be local government? Absolutely. And yet, again, it's democracy, and that's going to happen. But I congratulate you, 5 terms. You're either crazy or you're passionate. So either, I reckon in between both. But yes, I think you're never going to get rid of as long as the primary vote's there. I think the right people are in the job.
Thanks, Oscar.
Yes, I did say this few years ago. We have Oscar Wilde, and this is Oscar Mild.
Are you going to direct it to Oscar?
It depends, because each one of them will have something to say.
Oh, good.
I have been on.
Great. Thanks, Oscar. Yeah.
I have been on the council. This is my 2nd term, and yes, I'm enjoying because I'm giving something in return for having given me Australia as a second home. Although I have an EU passport, which means I can go or walk through any airport. But I love Australia, and I have lived in 5 countries before coming to Melbourne. What I would like to bring to the attention of Warwick is many people in the community think that local elections are a non-event. I've spoken to many because I'm reasonably known in Glen Ira, and I look after the Bentley, East Bentley and parts of McKinnon. What people think is, especially the young people, the Gen Ys, they think it's a waste of time. And people who counted my votes said they received in that booth about 250 crossing and saying, "Y'all are Richard Cranium." Maybe some are, who knows? But that destroys democracy.
Destroys it. So what's the question?
If I don't give a run to all six, then I won't go home happy.
Yes.
I disagree with, I agree to disagree with some of the panels, although I know 3 of them quite well. I disagree with 2 things. One is that it should be the right of the people to choose someone who is involved in the community already, doing work, and they should not be deprived, whether they have qualification or not, but they should be chosen if they are of sound mind.
Correct.
And can make...
That's a good point.
And make a...
I
told you...
Don't preach it, come on.
Now, qualification, I mean books. Mahatma Gandhi said, one's education has nothing to do with one's greatness. So, what I want to say today is, yes, Glen Ira is, I'm answering to Geoff. Glen Ira chooses attendance voting. Why? Because there is a group of 4 who would like their community to bring them over and over again, and they keep the mayoral among the 4, which means it is their right. So what would the state government do, and how can VEC break into this? Thank you.
Warwick, if you wish to comment, and then Mike, just a quick comment perhaps.
Oscar, thank you. As I said earlier, if I could change anything, it would be better engaging with the community, but it's not the VEC's problem on its own. It's a matter for the MAV, it's a matter for local government Victoria, it's a matter for the VEC, it's a matter for councils to get the message out to the community, to educate the community, to remove the apathy, to make sure that electors are engaged in the process. It is not just a matter for the VEC, it's a matter for all of us, including the state government.
So Oscar, it needs to come back through the community perhaps to the VEC. Yep, Mike.
Look, I think Phil's point that he made about good councillors is not a question about whether the ones that stand, whether you choose the right ones or not. It's a question about whether you get the right people to stand and whether it's something that's open to everybody. And I think that's where the reform needs to be, rather than how you elect the ones that already stand. So it's about making local government more attractive to get a broader range of skilled people into there. And I think that's what a lot of the debates have been missing this morning. That's right.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
One of the points that hasn't been made about the mayor, we do turn over every year, but one of the big advantages is you're a much better councillor who had the opportunity to be mayor, and I really appreciate the former mayors on my council who have got a much broader view about the way council operates, and that really needs to be taken into account. But also you're exhausted after 12 months in City Yarra. It's really hard to do more than 12 months because we work pretty hard. But my question relates to compulsory voting, because I identified, yes, we have compulsory voting, but not for everyone. We don't have for 70-year-olds, but there are a couple of other big exclusions. Big exclusion is property owners who don't reside in the municipality. And in City Yarra, that's about 45%. 45% of properties are rented. So that's a major exclusion. It's not it's understandable that only 50% of people vote of people on the rolls vote in the City of Yarra, given that demographic. But the other exclusion is that businesses My understanding is businesses have to re-enrol. Those who don't reside in municipality, run business but pay the rates, because that tends to be part of the lease arrangements, they have to re-enrol, and that was a change introduced under the Labor government under last review. So I have a question about that, whether the VEC is looking at that, it's sort of a reverse property qualification. You disenfranchise if you are a non-residential property owner. So I'd appreciate whether that's come to your attention and what is if that's being considered.
Gavin, did you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, I could make a comment on this because in Queensland you can't vote if you're just a property owner, you have to live there. And I think this is a very vexed question because it's hard either way. If you have taxation without representation, that's the issue, you can't vote. On the other hand, if you let the property owners vote, say in Port Douglas, which was in my shire, they would probably outnumber the residents, and it would be the property outnumbering the residents in voting. So this is quite a vexed issue. On balance, I think that the number one people that should vote is the resident. They're the people who live there. If someone else chooses to invest in there, they choose knowing what the situation is. But it would be nice if you could figure out some way that you could give them some sort of say. I'm not sure how you do this. They shouldn't be discounted altogether, but they shouldn't also overrule the people that actually live there or have the potential to do that.
Thank you.
Can I just say, I just think it's interesting, correct me if I'm wrong, people who know more about Melbourne, but if you remove the property entitlement to vote, as some are suggesting, I think you could say you certainly wouldn't have had the current or the previous mayor of Melbourne who wouldn't have been elected just from a vote of residents. So, I mean, my view is that you certainly could never make it compulsory for property owners to vote, and nor should you. I would prefer the Queensland model where, if you live in an area, you're entitled, you're expected to vote, it's compulsory, but if you don't vote. I think, I don't get to vote in another state or federal electorate just because I own a house over there, and I don't think you should have that entitlement at the local level either.
Yeah.
Just a question to maybe Warwick or Mike in relation to positive and negatives concerning the first past the post compared to preferential. I just personally can see that previously there's a candidate may have a significant amount of the votes, up to 20%, but after the preferences are undertaken, that person actually doesn't get into council. I think I just wonder if you could comment about that.
Thanks, Mike. I'm just going to sit on the fence on this one. As I said earlier, there are advantages and disadvantages to whatever voting system you have. And they're all well documented. We all know the disadvantage of first past the post, so we all have concerns about preference voting, preferential voting. It really is a matter for the sector and or the government to make a determination as to what voting system they want. I can't offer any more than that, I'm afraid. Advantages and disadvantages to any voting system.
Okay.
Do you want me to have a crack at that?
Yes, Mike, yep.
Well, I was asked to. Look, I think Warwick's right. There's pros and cons of each. It's not clear cut. But I think optional preferential is probably the preferred way to go. I think Geoff is right. It should be universal. It shouldn't be one rule for local government, one for state, one for feds. The reason I say that is because you do want the advice of your... you do want to make a choice. If my candidate doesn't get up, who would I prefer in Learn? The downside, of course, is you get all these preferential deals. But on balance, I think optional preferential. In other words, if you know who your people are and who your preferences are, so you can. If you don't want it, if you